I stood there staring blankly into the mirror after splashing cold water on my face. I also looked for an explanation, which I didn't find there. After some damn good sex, I got slapped in the face, both figuratively and literally. A lot of things were running through my head then, and I probably wondered what to do next. Then I remembered our common past. Teresa Daniels, née McDowell, was my wife. We had been married for 15 years, but I had known her for 4 years before that, starting in high school. To say that Terry and I were not close is an understatement. I was a smug teenager who was always trying to prove something. But Terry was not at all impressed. Every time I tried to ask her out, I was quickly turned down. In public, Terry often got the upper hand in our verbal arguments. By my senior year, I had learned to stay away from Teresa McDowell. College became a more meaningful phase for me. I got along well with the guys I hung out with and was popular with the girls. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I could be myself and do just fine. The summer after my freshman year, I returned home and went to a party with friends from high school. While the guys and I were playing beer pong, a group of people came. My team won, and I headed to the kitchen for a new drink. Suddenly, I felt a light tap on my shoulder. "Hi, Tom," I heard, turning around. To my surprise, Terry stood in front of me in a white string top and skinny jeans with ripped knees, an equally sexy smile on her face. Behind this smile, however, there was tension or anxiety, as if she was afraid that I would push her away. "Hey, Terry," I said carefully, looking back at the doorway to make sure there were no spectators. My understanding is that she could have been here for some kind of prank. "Did you go to see Mere Mortals for the evening?" I asked with a grin. Terry just shrugged, not deigning to answer the question. We struck up a fairly mundane conversation about our first year of college, classes, and other general topics. Finally, she took a deep breath and said, "If you're free this summer, maybe you'd like to meet up sometime." Her choice of words did not escape my attention. "Do you mean go to the beach or the library?" I pretended that I didn't understand. "How are your friends?" Her facial expression changed. She trusted me just as much as I trusted her. "No, stupid," she said a little louder. "Meet as if on a date." "Well, that would be much more interesting," I teased. "What are you doing next Friday? And do you like bowling at midnight?" Terry seemed to be considering my proposal. She probably expected me to suggest dinner at an expensive restaurant. Raising an eyebrow, I let her know I was serious. "I've never played bowling," she admitted. "Well, not counting childhood. Are you sure this will be fun?" "I'm sure," I replied. "This will give us a chance to get to know each other better." After all, we were not friends, and for the last year we had not seen each other at all. Terry and I had a wonderful evening. She turned out to be much more fun than I thought. She seemed to like my more mature personality, and we talked a lot about everything. She admitted that she thought I was a cocky asshole at school and that she had several serious boyfriends. I said that I generally thought the same about her, but admitted that I never tried to get to know her better. In general, we spent a lot of time together this summer. The only serious argument we had was in a nightclub when one of her former high school boyfriends, very drunk, came up to our table and asked her to dance without even looking at me. Terry just went with him to the dance floor without giving me a single glance. There was something in her behavior that night that should have remained in my memory, but I was too young and stupid to pay attention to it. When she returned to the table after 3 dances, 2 fast and 1 slow, she didn't even have time to sit down when she saw my face red with anger. "What?" She tried to laugh it off, but immediately looked away. I immediately attacked her with accusations of disrespect and so on. "Tom," she began with a hint of discipline in her voice, "Dave didn't mean anything bad. We dated for over 6 months during our senior year." I didn't know if she was pretending not to understand or trying to take over, but I wasn't going to put up with it. "But you're not dating him now, right?" I asked with irritation in my voice, and she shook her head. "Well, at least it's something. All I know is that you came here with me. He didn't even bother to ask permission, and you just went with him like you didn't care. I can leave if you two need some alone time." As soon as I started, I realized that I was starting to behave like before. I should have acted like an adult and expressed my point of view calmly. However, I didn't have time to correct myself because Terry unleashed all her Irish temperament on me. She made a scene for me right in the club, so much so that everyone around began to look around. Thank God the music was too loud. Her attack was so furious that I didn't even have time to respond, let alone formulate a coherent response. I just let her speak to the end. When she finally ran out of steam, she took a few deep breaths and drank her beer for a long time. Most of her tirade was useless chatter. "If you ever do this again," I said, looking at her intently, "it's over between us. Do you hear? Completely and completely." I stood up and headed out, walking slowly to see if she would take advantage of the olive branch extended to her. When I got into the car, Terry was at the door, almost begging me to wait. "Please, Tom, wait," she almost howled. "Sorry, okay?" She decided that she needed to stop there. "Sorry for being upset," I began. "I'm sorry for making fun of us both, or for the disrespect you showed me when Dave took you to the dance floor." That night we talked for a long time, sitting in my car in the parking lot, and then at her parents' house when crowds of drunks began to spill out of the club. We talked about her extreme temper and how it manifests itself. We discussed all our past relationships, and most importantly, we had a serious conversation about fidelity. I let her know, and she agreed, that from now on dance floor etiquette must be observed. True, she admitted that she still doesn't understand what exactly infuriated me so much. I had a hard time pulling myself together, but apparently I found the right words. This conversation became a turning point in our relationship. Terry received a clear picture of what I considered to be cheating, disrespect, and unacceptable behavior. We went back to our respective colleges, me to the University of Michigan and her to the Ohio State University. Our hometown, located almost an hour north of Detroit, was a small community of about 5,000 people. Everyone knew about each other. We called each other almost every evening for the first 2 months. I was looking forward to our Thanksgiving gathering. However, when I drove up to her parents' house on the eve of the holiday, she came out with such seriousness on her face that I immediately realized that something was wrong. I feared the worst, that she had found someone else. "I dropped out," Terry said, getting into my car. "Why?" I asked, stunned. "This is the third year. What's happened?" Terry looked embarrassed and didn't immediately find the words. "Social reasons," she finally said. "What does it mean?" I tried to find out. "The people I talked to," she answered with a deep sigh. "My roommate, in particular." Terry told me that her dorm roommate was the type who was sexually active and was constantly trying to persuade her to go to college parties with her. Terry's other friends, she said, were more like her neighbor's friends and were just as promiscuous. "You could have just said no," I said. She nodded but added, "I could, but the pressure from outside was too strong. I didn't mean to cheat on you." The last phrase struck me. "So you wanted to do what your friends did?" "No, that's not the point," she replied. "To be honest, Tom, I might be tempted. I'm not particularly experienced, except for what we did together. But I didn't want to spoil my reputation. The guys there were even more immature than the ones I dated at school. I didn't want to be known as a girl for all occasions." Everything she said sounded completely reasonable, but I realized that her main reason had nothing to do with me, her boyfriend. This threw me a little off track. Terry and I spent a quiet holiday with our families. She was nervous, even scared about me going back to college. There was nothing I could do to ease her fears. However, all this turned out to be unimportant when on January 23rd, I received a fateful call. "Tom, this is Terry," she said in an overly formal tone. After a pause, she blurted out, "I'm pregnant." Plans were made. I temporarily left my studies, packed my things, and returned home. The wedding took place in a hurry. Everything was developing rapidly, and everyone considered it their duty to express their opinion. I often felt like I was on the carousel at an amusement park right after winning a hot dog eating contest. Both our families supported us. Only occasionally did I notice a hint of disappointment on their faces. They helped us rent an inexpensive two-room apartment, and by the 6th month of Terry's pregnancy, they were already stocking up on diapers and other things necessary for the baby. Terry's father got me a job with Watson Builders, Inc., a fairly large contractor in our area. Dreams of designing houses and other buildings had to be put on hold. Through all this chaos, Terry and I became closer. It always warmed my soul. She could have complained bitterly, but instead she made lemonade out of every situation in her life. There was true love for each other in our hearts. Stephen Riley was born on August 29th, a healthy, beautiful boy. He was born a week premature, but was as strong as an ox. Terry's life and mine were enriched to an unimaginable level. After Stephen's first birthday, Terry found a 30-hour-a-week job at the local library while her mother and my mother helped care for our son. I started taking online evening courses to continue my education. There wasn't enough money, that was obvious. We literally stayed on one wing and a prayer, as the song says. I drew strength from Terry's tenacity. She was a fighter for her family and inspired me even in those moments when she seemed exhausted, but she still continued. In the midst of all this fuss, I planned small weekend getaways with Terry once a month so that we could feel the closeness of our love again. Terry's job at the library didn't last long as she announced her pregnancy again. I started working overtime whenever possible, and we managed to negotiate a move to a larger apartment on the ground floor. It was still a two-room apartment, but the area had increased by 35 square meters. With the birth of our daughter, Angela Lynn, who brought joy to my heart, I also received a promotion to site foreman. Terry went back on the pill as soon as she could. We worked as hard as we could to provide for our family and raise our children well. I finally caught my luck when Stephen was 12 years old. By then, Terry and I had become experts at managing our modest finances. Having two supportive families and living in a small community also helped a lot. I had just graduated a month ago and was offered a job in my field of architectural engineering at Burton Industries, a regional company located about halfway between our city and Detroit. Our monthly income immediately doubled, and I was doing something I truly loved. After working at Burton Industries for only a few months, Terry and I bought a 4-bedroom house outside of town. Those few years were the best for our family. The children grew up, and my wife and I found our rhythms. Terry returned to work part-time at the library when a position opened up. But for me, the warmest memories have always been of those years when we fought for survival. We rarely quarreled, even when we were on the verge. We always made peace, and before going to bed, we sincerely said to each other, "I love you." However, everyday life, when we had enough money, but still had difficulty making ends meet, somehow dulled our feelings. We seemed to have enough, but the children always demanded something. The house constantly required investment. I started to wonder if we'd ever be so far along that we could just relax. Then the pandemic hit. Almost nothing was built, with the exception of large national companies. Burton held on to its employees as best it could. I continued to work in construction and also did design work. Others in my department either quit or were fired for refusing to do more work for the same salary. Terry continued to work at the library until the day it closed. When the virus receded, we faced a new problem several at once. The housing market has stalled. Prices soared as developers tried to recoup losses. People, including many from our town, moved from blue states to red states and vice versa, desperately trying to find their place and settle near like-minded people. Remote work has emptied office buildings and traditional jobs have disappeared. Many of the offices stood empty with "for rent" signs on their facades. Ultimately, for the sake of Burton's survival, 15 of the remaining 21 employees were laid off. This affected me too. Terry and I had a little savings, $5,000. There were another $14,000 in my pension fund. We are in trouble again. Our region typically receives more than enough snow each year. Our city, located on a large river that connects two Great Lakes, often suffers from the so-called lake effect, which causes heavy snowfall. But that year, spring came early, and instead of snow it rained in April, and flowers bloomed in May. And the heat was unbearable for June. 2 weeks humid and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Terry and I were on the verge of a breakdown. We both tried our best not to blame each other, although I think deep down we still did. Mom, can we at least turn on the air conditioning for a little while? My 15-year-old daughter Angela pleaded before dinner. I'm literally dying here. Her 17-year-old brother Stephen was old enough to understand our financial situation, but he, too, seemed to be hoping for a miracle. It was one of the lowest moments of my life, one of the lowest. I couldn't provide for my family, and even though I knew it wasn't entirely my fault, it still hurt. Terry noticed my distress, but she still had a slight smile on her face. "No, guys, I'm sorry," she said in a soothing voice. "You can splash your face with water, sit in front of a fan, or run under a sprinkler." The children signed dissatisfied and went outside. Terry's mood began to improve on the eve of Independence Day. Our parents and Terry's brother Peter and his family were coming over for a big barbecue, as always. This year, they brought meat and most of the products. I took some money out of our savings and took the kids to a fireworks store. Plus, our neighbor Maggie was always there at every family reunion, and there was a specific reason for this. Maggie was a widow who already lived in our area when we bought the house. Although I had just gotten a job and Terry was getting ready to return to the library, we had not yet managed to improve our financial situation. Maggie offered to babysit the children when needed, usually 3 to 4 times a week. She also took them out of school until they were older. The children adored her warm, caring personality and remained close to her even as they grew older. Maggie's husband, Stan, the love of her life, as she often said, was a fighter pilot in the Navy. He died suddenly during a training flight over the Mediterranean Sea. Maggie was what you would call a true support person, with an incredibly positive outlook on life. One day, when Terry had to stay in the library, I asked her how she maintained such an attitude. "I grew up in the church," she told me. "Even though I don't go there now, I believe in being kind to everyone and not judging anyone. This does not mean that I do not judge others, because I am only human. But I believe that people reap what they sow, and since I can only control myself and my actions, I try to do the right thing." Although Terry and I were 38, Maggie was already 45. She kept herself in excellent shape and said that it was all thanks to Palad's classes. If I didn't know her age, I would easily mistake her for the same age as my wife. "Wow," I answered. "That's a really wise point, especially the way you explained it." "Good advice. Did your husband share the same values?" "Partly," she sighed, stirring the spaghetti sauce. "He was a big dreamer, but we complemented each other, and I was quite happy to be his wife. I will always love him, so much so that if I ever have another man, it will be by God's will. I'm not going to look for new love." I always found Maggie's worldview refreshing, not only because she thought like that, but because she lived by those principles. The barbecue, as always, was wonderful. Peter brought several new varieties of craft beer, and he and I had a tasting. I drank in moderation because I was always in charge of the fireworks. The kids were delighted, and Terry and our parents sat on the veranda with glasses of wine. This day helped me forget about our problems. After everyone had left and the children went with friends to watch the city fireworks, Terry suddenly felt romantic. I was exhausted, but I never gave up on intimacy with my wife. "Leave it," she said in a languid voice when I was about to start cleaning up after the holiday. "We'll do it in the morning. I want you up now. Who am I to argue?" Enjoying the moment after wonderful sex, Terry settled herself on my chest, ideally suited to me. "I have found a solution to our financial problems," she said softly and tenderly. I almost didn't hear these words. Almost. "What? What's the solution?" I asked, sitting up slightly to look at her. "A few weeks ago, I saw an ad for a TV show on Instagram," she continued. "I applied and passed the selection. The main prize is $350,000. It took my breath away. I quickly freed myself from her embrace and sat down. "What do you mean, pass the selection? What other show is like Jeopardy? I filled out the application, thinking I had no chance, but last week they called me back. It's a reality show somewhere between Survivor and the one where everyone lives in a big house. Oh yeah, Big Brother. No way, absolutely not. I was angry and categorical, although I knew that I looked pathetic. There's no way I'm going to let my wife be on one of these stupid shows where people are used and humiliated. Do you know what's going on there? Of course you do. You watch these shows. Come on, honey. She tried to approach me gently. It's not as bad as you think. Nothing will happen that will disgrace you or our family, I promise. I will never allow this to happen. I took a few deep breaths. I didn't have to explain it to her the first time, and I was beside myself with anxiety. Terry, listen, I started again. All these shows are built on deception. Participants are used for the sake of entertainment. On Big Brother, all the contestants are a bunch of people with Hollywood dreams. And 100% of the guys from our area could easily survive on a show like Naked and Afraid or Alone. To be honest, I'm not a survivalist, but even I know that on the first day you need to catch fish, eat enough, and then spend energy on building a shelter. Doing it in any other order is simply suicidal, let alone looking for edible mushrooms or hunting a full-grown black bear with a bow and arrow. So just one fact that they either use real participants or deceive you already raises serious doubts in me. Logic seemed to cool her ardor, but she immediately changed tactics and went on the offensive. "We need money, Tom," she said. "If I win, it will change our lives. Even for second place, they give 100,000. This is just a pair competition." She clearly wasn't going to listen to common sense. "And who is your other half?" I asked sharply. "What?" She didn't immediately understand what I meant. "You said that this is a doubles competition. So who is your partner?" She at least blushed. "Well, the participants are not really couples. More like partners who are chosen before the start of the show." "Terry," I tried to be as stern as possible, "you're clearly not finishing your sentence." "My answer is no. I will not allow my wife to go on some stupid reality show that will ruin our lives and reputations, no matter how much money they offer." And here I received the hardest slap in the face of my life. I stood in the bathroom and looked at my reflection in the mirror, seeing a man who looked 10 years older. My shoulders were slumped. I dried my face with a towel. I wanted to go out there, grab my wife by the shoulders, and give her a good shake. This thought reminded me that it was all over with Terry for today. I had never raised my hand to a woman, especially my wife, but now I could no longer control my emotions. I silently returned to the bedroom, glaring at my wife. "I'm sorry," she began. I shouldn't have. I raised my hand to silence her. "Not now," I said. "No talking today. I can hardly stand the sight of you. I am going to sleep." Taking the pillow, I headed towards the door. "Wait, Tom," she tried soothingly. "We need to talk about this. I know you're upset. Let me explain everything." I said not now. Holding back my anger, I raised my voice. "Tomorrow, I'm tired and out of my mind right now because of what you did to me after. It doesn't matter." Volume. There was almost hysteria in her voice when I went out into the corridor. "I need you to listen to me. We don't have time. My plane leaves for the island on Sunday afternoon." I froze. That's exactly how I felt, as if frozen in icy shock. I tilted my head back into the room and glanced at her. "Just wonderful, Terry. This means that you are also insidious, among other things." I almost couldn't sleep that night. I dozed off several times, but every time I opened my eyes, I remembered this nightmare that my life had turned into. I made coffee in the morning. The children were sleeping because they returned late. Terry walked into the kitchen wearing her long robe as if it was a normal Saturday morning. "Hello," she said guiltily. I responded in kind and sat down at the table with a cup of coffee and a bagel. I didn't offer her breakfast. "First of all," she began, "I want to apologize for the way I presented this to you yesterday. It was thoughtless, I know. I've been meaning to say. For a week now, but I couldn't find the words or the right time. The right time would have been before you decided everything for us, I snapped. Can I explain so that you don't lose your temper? She begged. I have seen this image many times over the years of our marriage. I once thought it was cute, but now it feels cheap. I'll let you insult me once, because I know I've made you very angry. Okay, I replied. Sorry for losing my temper. We really need to discuss this. Terry looked hopeful and prepared to give her prepared speech. It took her a few moments to collect her thoughts. I wondered what lies she was preparing to tell me. It wasn't like her. Like I said, she finally spoke. I saw the ad and applied. And last week I was informed that I had been chosen. The show is called Fire Island and will run for 8 weeks. It begins with a group of participants and their partners, who are described as other male participants. They team up with women to perform physical and mental tasks. Members of both groups are kicked out of the show or sent home if they fail to complete the tasks. She fell silent for a moment and looked at me. I had an idea where this would lead, but decided to let her finish before finally saying no. So I just kept quiet, and she continued. I know what you're thinking, she said. This is a trap for participants with sneaky twists, or there will be some tricks, because sex sells. But that's not true. I asked all the right questions. I will give you documents for your review. Terry, I interrupted, all these documents were written by studio lawyers. No matter what you think or say, they will deceive you anyway, and you will already be there, and you will have no choice but to continue playing by their rules. Her dissatisfied expression said it was time to change tactics. We always dealt with difficulties, Terry, I reminded him. Do you remember that we live in a small town where everyone is conservative, our neighbors, our family? Any mistake you make on this show will attract a ton of unnecessary attention, and it will probably be something we can't handle. I want you to withdraw right now. I, she faltered, I can't do this, Tom. I signed a contract with the executive producer, with a production company. If I refuse, they will sue. We don't have much to take away except this house, I warned. No, she quickly looked away, looked at me, then back to the side. No, Tom, I have already made a commitment. Why don't you understand? I will never jeopardize our marriage or our love. You already did it, I breathed. You acted alone. You excluded me from making a decision that should have been shared. Then you kept it a secret, knowing that I would be against it. And finally, you informed me about this one day before your departure. One damn day, Terry. I began to raise my voice, becoming more and more emotional. I went to the bathroom on the first floor to wash my face with cold water again. There I noticed how bad the bruise on my cheek was from her slap yesterday. Damn her, I thought. Let him leave, and then whatever happens. When I returned to the kitchen, Terry was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. It was a look somewhere between smugness and remorse. I'm sorry, she said, sincerely this time. I betrayed your trust by not telling you right away, but I knew that you would be against it. You betrayed more than just trust, I pointed out. How about respect? Even when money was tight, did I ever make decisions behind your back? Have I shown you the disrespect you showed me? Have I ever done? We have just such difficulties now, Tom, she interrupted. And I found a way to solve them, not forever, but at least until you find a good job. If you would stop worrying that I might embarrass you, you would realize that this is the right decision. I want us to be able to afford Christmas this year, maybe even take the kids somewhere on holiday. I don't want to quarrel with you because we won't see each other for more than 8 weeks. I promise you that I will not disgrace you, the children, or anyone else. I hope you can even be proud of me when this is all over. I sat in silence, thinking about her words. I suddenly realized that for most of our family life, I followed her lead, giving in when possible. Due to financial problems, I was a poor leader for our family, only trying to please her during times of difficulty. Finally, I knew what to say. Terry, I stood up to look her straight in the eyes. I highly doubt I'll be proud of you after all this. But know that when you return, you and I will have big problems to solve. The children will soon leave our house, and only you and me will remain. After this little trick, we will have to rebuild our marriage if we even have one. We will probably have to turn to a professional for help. Now it was her turn to give in to me, and it seemed abnormal. This proved how unbalanced our relationship was. She thanked me for the opportunity and again promised not to let me down. Terry spent the entire day telling our children, her parents, her brother Peter and his wife, and all her friends. Even Maggie stopped by at about 5:30 in the evening. I opened the door when Maggie arrived. "Hello, Tom," she said, somehow more seriously than usual. "Can I come in?" I honestly couldn't remember the last time she asked permission to come over. "Of course," I answered with a question in my eyes. Terry came out into the living room. "Oh, hi, Maggie," she exclaimed, as if Maggie had come to ask her to the prom. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Let's go to the kitchen and I'll explain everything to you. I trust you completely, but I understand that it has been a long time since you babysat." I left them alone, but 10 minutes later I joined them at the table, where Terry was discussing who needed care and when. Maggie glanced at me from time to time, seemingly only half listening to my wife as she talked in detail about the children's meal schedule and extracurricular activities. Stephen already had a driver's license and could drive himself and his sister to class in Terry's car. When they finished, Maggie stood up, clearly uncomfortable. I walked her to the door. "When did you find out about this?" she asked when I opened the door. "Last night, after the barbecue," I answered sadly. "Poor thing," she said softly, lightly touching my cheek. "Well, I'll be here to help you with the kids for these 8 weeks. If you need to talk, I'm always ready to listen." I thanked our wonderful neighbor and said goodbye to her. When Terry and I got into bed, she immediately began our usual game. "Do you want to have some fun?" she asked seductively. "We have quite a long break ahead of us." "We did this on Friday," I answered emotionlessly. "I'm mentally exhausted and just want to sleep." Terry froze for a moment. Her reaction was subtle, but knowing her so well, I caught it right away. Then she reached out to me and began to caress me. "Tom, I'm going away for 2 months, and you'll be away from me for 2 months. Now you hate me, but my love for you is strong, so strong that I will endure it for us," she whispered as she continued to caress me. "I want you to remember this moment. This is our memory that will help us get over the separation so that we can continue when I return. Don't refuse me." With these words, she bent over and began to pleasure me. Despite how angry I was, the pleasure was too hard to resist. She didn't hesitate, dropped her panties, and sat on me. "I love you, Tom. I always have." "You love me too, and now you want me as much as I want you," she whispered, looking straight into my eyes. It was incredibly pleasant, but I restrained my desire, resisting with all my might. "Thank you, darling." "I love you," she whispered, kissing my forehead and lying down next to me. I fell asleep without any confidence that our relationship, our marriage, would survive this test. In the morning, bright sunlight flooded our bedroom. The worst thing about the summer heat was that it did not subside even at night. I woke up covered only with a sheet up to my waist. Terry was already on her feet, walking back and forth between the bathroom and the bedroom. I quickly realized that she was packing her suitcase. Even before going to bed, I decided not to make her life easier on this last day, and in the light my doubts only strengthened. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Terry greeted me happily. I sat down and looked at her suitcase. It was our average bag from the travel kit, not the big one she usually took even on short trips. We received this set as a wedding gift, but rarely used it. Even on weekends, Terry usually packed almost all of her belongings. I mentally noted this fact. "Could you prepare breakfast?" she asked sweetly. Her calm and carefree tone almost made me sick, as if she had no intention of leaving her family for 8 weeks. Stephen was still sleeping, as he liked to stay in bed longer on weekends. Angela was getting ready for soccer practice. I was proud that she played on the junior team as a sophomore. The morning passed quickly. Terry was focused on her own business, and we didn't talk much. I took my daughter to practice, and she said goodbye to her mother before leaving as she had other plans after practice. Later, I drove Terry to the airport. We were silent most of the way. Finally, she found something to say. "Honey," she began, "I know you're worried. I know you don't like it at all. But please remember my promises. Even if they tweak something for ratings or views, it's all just a montage, and it's actually not that bad." She clearly hoped for my assurances. "You're not helping," I replied. "It doesn't make me feel any better." "Sorry," she said quietly as we approached the departure area. "Remember, I won't be able to call you. My phone was left at home. I left all the show paperwork on your laptop bag. If something happens, there is an emergency number there." Terry wanted to have a touching send-off, but I wasn't in the mood for it. For the first time, I saw a shadow of anxiety in her eyes. It almost made me smile. Both of our families called me that evening, and I was amazed at their reaction. They were kind to me and not judgmental as I expected. "How could you let her do this?" Her father, Steve McDowell, scolded me. "Are you completely crazy?" I did my best to assuage their obvious fears in the only way I knew how. I lied. That night, I summoned the strength to at least make a plan instead of spending the third night in a row with little to no sleep. Taking into account that if everything goes as I told my wife before she left, then we will continue to live as a married couple, but we will definitely go through family counseling. However, I also had to prepare for the worst. Besides that, I won't be able to afford counseling or much else if I don't find a job. Maggie didn't have to show up until Tuesday night to help with dinner because I had an interview with a construction company on the other side of town that did a lot of work in Ohio during the winter. When I finished, I checked on my kids and finally put my head on the pillow. I woke up refreshed and took out the papers I had been studying the night before, the same ones Terry had left for me. At exactly 8 o'clock, I was on the phone using the number they gave me. I spoke in a low voice since the children were on summer vacation, except for my daughter's soccer practice, and were still sleeping. I immediately learned that there was a 3-hour time difference between us, so I would have to try again later. This gave me time to think about what I was going to say, what responses I might get in return, and to calm down enough to not lash out. From 11 to 11:30, I was transferred to other employees several times, and I listened to the elevator music for too long. So this is what it is, an emergency helpline. Rather, it was an exercise in extreme patience. Finally, Levy Jenkins himself, executive producer of Overboard Productions, came on the line. After his official greeting, I got down to business. "My name is Tom Daniels. I want you to remove my wife from your show," I said boldly. "Ah, Mr. Daniels, isn't it?" I could literally feel his smug grin on the phone. "I'm happy to discuss any concerns you may have, answer any questions, but I'm afraid we have a signed contract with your wife, Teresa. The show must go on, as they say." I could not even imagine that he would play this card, and, feeling confident, I understood exactly how I would solve this problem. "She signed this contract without consulting me," I began. "I have to believe that, based on other reality shows I've seen, she was either tricked or coerced. We never force potential participants to participate in our projects," he interrupted me confidently. "It would be unethical and would certainly subject us to scrutiny, if not litigation. I'm sorry that you and your wife may have communication problems, but I assure you that she understands perfectly how the show works, how you can win prize money, and today she, like all the other participants, passes instructions on all the subtleties of the rules, including etiquette issues, what is allowed and what is not." Then tell me about the show. I wanted him to see me as a person who emotionally defends all his points. "I'd love to do it," he said. "But first you have to understand that, as with any project like this, certain things become clearer in real time." I didn't answer, so he continued. "You may ask questions that I can't or won't answer, either because they're important to the success of the show or because they haven't happened yet." "What must participants do to win?" I asked directly. "I'll skip that part, Mr. Daniels," he exclaimed, "because I'm a busy person and I'm sure I know what you want, what worries you. All I can say is that in my business, sex sells. Otherwise, we would not have chosen a tropical island for the show, but another location. Will your friends and family see your wife on TV in a revealing bikini? Yes, that's true, but remember, she agreed to it. Will there be sexual innuendo? Sure, but it's a prime-time family show. Will there be tasks that will need to be done with a double meaning? Absolutely, but no more than some of the performances you've seen in Dancing with the Stars. But how do they win? I wasn't going to give up. That's for us to know, he was still smug. But it's up to you and the rest of America to find out. What I can tell you without unnecessary details is that, as in each of our projects of this kind, there is a plot twist. Something that participants will have to figure out for themselves if they want a chance at the grand prize. And Mr. Daniels, I can say with confidence that you, too, will be very pleased with this turn if your wife shows common sense and is true to her moral principles. Jenkins hurried to end the call before I could ask any more questions and said goodbye. 10 minutes later, I made 2 calls, then logged into my Fidelity account and withdrew 10,000 of the $14,246. The remaining amount may be enough to pay taxes. I looked at the weather app, saw that it was already 95 degrees outside, and turned the air conditioning on full blast. I planned to keep it on. The kids and I had a quiet dinner that evening. Angela dominated the conversation, talking about her school friends and how excited everyone was that Terry was on a major TV game show. Not only our family, but judging by the size of the city, everyone probably already knew what was happening. I felt more confident in my plan, and those seconds when I began to doubt reaffirmed in me that I had to protect myself and my family if things went wrong. I felt there was a 90% chance that Jenkins was just throwing dust in my eyes. He had a signed contract, he said so himself. Whatever the producers had planned for Terry and the others, I didn't know, but I didn't really believe that my wife would be able to figure it out. Terry was hot-tempered and stubborn. Of course, she was a good person, but it was precisely these characteristic shortcomings that led me to the path I embarked on. These traits meant that she would make a decision and choose a course of action without fully seeing what awaited her. Terry was also a wonderful wife and mother. I even felt sorry for her because of the whirlwind of troubles that she could soon find herself in, but she herself created the situation in which she found herself, and she did it without consulting me. The next evening, Maggie prepared dinner, engaging as always with my children. Once again, I noticed how easily she engaged them in conversation. She kept glancing at me all the time. After dinner, Stephen and Angela helped clean up the kitchen and went to see their friends. Maggie poured us a glass of wine, and we sat down at the table. "How was your interview?" she asked sincerely. "Seems great," I replied. Indeed, I had a good feeling that by the end of the week I would have a job, even though it was a step back from design. "How are you holding up, Tom, with all this?" She hesitated, but I understood what she meant. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I think I'm still in shock." "Maybe," she said thoughtfully, "but I think the initial shock has passed. What I see in your eyes today, I think it's an idea. It looks like you've come up with something. Maybe you haven't thought of everything yet, but you have already outlined a plan." I was stunned by this, but I tried not to show it. Maggie has been a family friend for so long that I never imagined she could read me so well. "I don't have a crystal ball, Maggie," I said, "but I have a responsibility to protect my family in case things go wrong. I will not allow my children or me to be laughed at in public." Maggie sipped her wine thoughtfully. "Understand. Tom, can I ask you a question? Before Terry hit you with this, would you say you had a good marriage? Even, perhaps, excellent?" "Yes, I would say so," I answered honestly. "Then let me give you some advice, and since I care about all of you, it's just a piece of advice. Can you try to give Terry a chance to get through it herself? Try to give her a little trust and let her figure it out on her own. I have a feeling that she will quickly realize that she has gone too far and realize her mistake. How she handles this realization will be crucial when she returns to her family. Can you give her that chance?" "I'll try," I replied to Maggie. "In fact, I can say for sure that I will try." The next morning, the company called me and congratulated me and offered me a job. I was invited to come to the orientation on Friday, and I agreed. I was finally employed again. On Wednesday night, Maggie, the kids, and I were eagerly awaiting the first episode of the show. The private island turned out to be very small, just south of the British island of Basse-Terre, which most people knew as Guadeloupe. I was surprised to see the show's title, Wish Island, on the screen. This was one more thing that I would have to put aside in the treasury of lies. The women were from all over the United States, and one was from Canada. There were 28 of them, ages ranging from 26 to 44. Terry was in the middle-age group, but without a doubt one of the most attractive women in a tiny bikini, just like everyone else. During the interviews, women were asked where they were from, how they live, and a little about their families. Only 10 had no children. They were all in serious relationships. Most were married. As I started counting, listening to the interviews one after another, I felt a lump in my throat. Maggie noticed this, and instead of going for a beer during the commercial break, she returned with a glass of my favorite whiskey on the rocks. After the basics of the game and the rules were once again repeated for the television audience, the women and their much younger and beefier men received their first task. The men were all between the ages of 25 and 29, and each of them looked like the most attractive guy that could be chosen from the large crowd. The first task turned out to be just a prelude to a real test. The women were told that they needed to choose a man they considered intelligent and physically healthy if they wanted to live to the second week. The last 10 minutes of the episode showed the men and women sitting around a pool, drinking smoothies, and getting to know each other in the tropical heat. Women lived in one large house, and men lived in the next one. It looked like flirting with the audience. Terry was shown in the hallway of the house, not far from one of the bathrooms, talking quietly with Jules, an attractive blonde only a year younger than my wife. Apparently, they guessed one of the unspoken rules. You need to secure an alliance with the one you are competing against. They asked each other basic questions, trying to figure out whether they could be trusted. Once they had learned as much as they could about each other, Jules told Terry that she had a plan to get the 2 best men for tomorrow's mission. All she expected from Terry in return was a promise to never vote against her at a members' meeting. It seemed to me that Jules overestimated her strength, but I had more serious concerns. When the show ended, I breathed a sigh of relief, and not only Maggie noticed it. Angela gave me a curious look. "God, Dad," she said with emotion. "You're very upset, no? You're really worried about Mom, right?" "Sister," Stephen decided to defend me. As an almost adult boy, he probably understood everything too or had similar concerns. "How would you feel if your boyfriend was one of these men and was chasing all these dear women?" He fell silent abruptly. Angela wisely did not answer his question. "Ugh," Stephen was going to say butts, right? Maggie laughed, and so did I. We just couldn't resist. The kids went upstairs and Maggie took my hand. "See, it's not that bad," she tried to say with confidence. "I think she did very well." Yes, she did, I had to admit. But she's still running around the screen in a swimsuit that's 2 sizes too small for her. Friday was one of those rare days when you feel like you're riding on the clouds, and that's exactly how I felt. The heat wave wasn't expected to end until next Monday, so I used the silver sunscreen on my car window to apply an extra layer of deodorant. The instruction went well because for me it was not something new, just different processes. That evening Maggie did everything she could to get me to talk about what happened to her and the children at dinner. She knew I was worried because my wife wasn't there to share my big day with me. The children were sincerely happy for me. Strange, but they never asked about the air conditioning. We settled down to watch Terry's show on TV. From the very beginning of the next episode, there was an unexpected twist. Of the 28 participants, half were sent home. Almost the same number of men also dropped out. The presenter beat around the bush for too long without explaining the reasons, which only increased the audience's interest in what unspoken rules could have caused such an outcome. The next challenge would be based on wits rather than strength, and after that the number of participants would be halved again. There were supposed to be 7 women and 8 men left. Since the focus was on the women, a quick arithmetic suggested that the finale would come down to 2 women. The presenter said nothing about the upcoming test, but advised the women to get to know their partners better, intimately, of course, in a platonic sense, as he added with an artificial smile. He also said that the participants could stay with the partners they worked with in the previous task or switch, but this had to be done that same night. The rest of the show was devoted to how the participants chose their matches. My wife got almost no airtime. Terry stayed with a guy named Travis, but after Jules was eliminated, she began a new alliance with a woman named Ivy. After the show, Maggie distracted me by working out all the details of my schedule for the next 2 weeks. It was necessary, but I couldn't help but think about what a caring and kind woman she is. I was scheduled to leave for a business trip Monday through Wednesday and return Thursday afternoon after visiting a construction site in Toledo. Maggie offered to stay at my house with the kids, even though we both knew they were old enough to take care of themselves. Taking into account all the changes, I immediately agreed. "Maggie," I began, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, I think you can," she smiled, but looked a little wary. "Why didn't you ever get married again?" I noticed how her face changed. Sorry, that was too personal a question." "No," she replied. "No, I just didn't expect it." She took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I loved my husband Dale with all my heart. He was a wonderful person, and beyond that, the true love of my life. I never liked his military service, so I guess if I had to complain about anything, it would be that. And the fact that this service took him away from me forever was almost impossible to cope with at first. The first year almost broke me," she continued, sipping her coffee. "I saw him in my dreams during the day. I saw him in a dream at night. The dreams were different only in location and circumstances. We were always separated, sometimes by just an arm's length. I couldn't reach him, and he couldn't reach me. The look he gave me right before I woke up with a start probably mirrored my own expression. He always expressed deep sadness and regret that he could not take that simple step of reaching out another 4 or 5 inches and grasping my hand. There was a deep and real sadness about it. He was an exceptional man," I said respectfully. "Yes, there was," she agreed. "Over time, dreams disappear, but memories remain. And then I realized that I had exchanged my life for these memories, and he would never want that. I wouldn't want him to live like this if it were the other way around. So I started living again." "I'm sorry we could never pay you more," I said, feeling guilty. "It wasn't about the money or what it is now," she answered with a sad smile. "The government, in my humble opinion, is doing much more for the dead than for the wounded. Between survivor benefits, insurance, and a lifetime military pension, I'm fine. Dale also took out a private life insurance policy through his uncle. I never expected them to pay out the money, but they did. I owe nothing on my house or car, and my monthly income greatly exceeds my expenses." In any case, I flinched, but she stopped me with a gesture. "So to answer your question," she finished, "I haven't met him yet. The one who will be the next love of my life. I forced myself to go out into the world, did charity work, and helped your family. I even went to a widow's bridge club. I was the youngest and decided that this was not for me. But when I meet him, I will know." Maggie's story touched me so much that I sincerely hugged her. She took it with grace and then told me to go to bed, saying goodbye and walking out the door. That night I lay in bed and thought about Maggie and her sad story. What struck me most was the comparison between her relationship with Dale and the one I had with Terry. Terry was a driven person. At that time I was the same. It's not that I changed, but things weren't working out the way either Terry or I wanted or planned. Of course, we had our wonderful children, but I couldn't help but think that Terry saw me as a failure. She never said it out loud, but it was a thought that could get into her head and make her think that she had to take control, if only for these short 8 weeks. If that's true, and as I replayed our years together in my head, I began to grasp the meaning. Then Terry and I had a much bigger problem than any sexual intrigue that these shows might have gotten her into. However, I knew that I would not tolerate outright disrespect or public humiliation from my wife on this island. The next week, everything changed. First, I was sent to a new facility, and I was completely focused on work. On Tuesday night, I went to a small sports bar in Toledo to have a beer with the guys to get to know my new colleagues better. On Wednesday, I gave up another night at the bar and ordered a small pizza to my room so I could watch the show with Terry. This time, the show started out a little differently and focused more on the contestants acting like couples. Terry was still paired with Travis, a tan 26-year-old who was not only physically strong, but also had a wit. The hardest thing for me was watching their private time, especially how my wife interacted with Travis. They sat by the pool and told each other about their lives. They swung together in a hammock, talking about their dreams for the future. Their closeness alone was enough to make me want to divorce Terry when she returned home. She didn't say anything bad about me. In fact, Travis turned out to be quite a skilled communicator in my eyes. He spent a lot of time asking questions about her school and university years and her ambitions after them. I took this as an attempt to gain her trust so that she could discuss me later. However, every time Travis became too personal or too persistent in his touches, Terry politely but firmly stopped his attempts and said goodbye. It dawned on me that perhaps one of the unspoken rules of the show was to remain faithful. Perhaps controlling your desires on Wish Island was the key to victory. Towards the end of the show, the women and men were given a series of clues to find answers to questions about their partners that were hidden throughout the complex, including the beach. This meant that they could rummage through each other's personal belongings both in the women's and men's houses. The audience should have been told who would win only in the next episode. Life went on. I was working at a new facility and returned home to my family on Thursday. I spent time with the children, although they no longer needed my attention as much, and with Maggie, who was still nearby. She and I spent evenings and weekends talking about things we had never talked about before, much the same way Terry did with Travis on some distant island. In the fourth week, another participant was eliminated, but it was not Terry. Viewers voted, and while it wasn't clear whether Terry and Travis were rigging one of the answers or whether Travis was just that smart, I never found out. The question was how much money Terry would like to have in retirement when she graduated from university. Curious question, I thought, but Travis found her answer, hidden in her toiletry bag, stuck to her toothpaste. I just assumed she was lying to me, Travis said proudly around the fire during the traditional members' meeting. If she and her husband were fine, she wouldn't be on this show. I remembered the old saying, "Do you kiss your, spouse with such a lying mouth?" So I decided to look for her toothpaste. Travis was praised by all the remaining participants, and of course my wife made it to the next round. I was sickened by how it all happened, and of course, my wife never graduated from university. The challenge of the week was for the men to teach the women how to surf. This skill was listed on the pre-test questionnaire that the participants filled out, and the presenter warned the home audience, but not the women, that if anyone lied, they would be automatically eliminated. However, if everyone was honest, the first woman standing on the board would be protected from elimination next week, no matter what happens. The remaining contestants will be scrutinized by their peers at the traditional campfire gathering, and one of them will be eliminated. The first one who was able to stay on the wave was Ivy, which ensured her safety. Terry had difficulty as Travis patiently tried to explain the basics to her. There was a lot of physical contact in this process, both on the beach and in the water. Terry fell off her board hard and Travis rushed under the wave to be the hero and rescue her. What I saw didn't make me feel as strongly as I expected. Perhaps it was due to the fact that I had already come to terms with this game. I was certainly worried about how much was going on behind the scenes, and I reminded myself that from the day Terry left our house, I had a solid plan. Maggie seemed to sense my relaxed attitude and asked if I was feeling better. When I answered yes, she surprised me again. "Remember, Tom," she warned, "we're only halfway there. A lot more can happen." I told her she was right. Of course, I was an adult and understood this. Maggie didn't say this in a condescending way. She was simply voicing what I already knew, and it calmed me down. Next week, I went on a business trip. We had a strict deadline, and I worked late every night, so I didn't get to watch the show. However, all the effort paid off. On Thursday, we finished work by noon, and I headed home early. When I arrived, the house was empty. Climbing the stairs, I heard someone singing in the shower. It was Maggie. It dawned on me that I hadn't made love in weeks, and I wasn't counting the last night with Terry when she used me as a toy. I was ashamed of my thoughts, but I decided to stand and watch. The bathroom door was ajar, and the glass shower door was fogged up, making it impossible to see anything. Moments flashed through my mind when Maggie was dressed in something revealing, and I imagined how she looked naked. We didn't have to wait long. The shower turned off, but Maggie continued to sing. She opened the door, and for a moment I saw her attractive figure with perfect curves. I felt something tremble inside me. But the vision did not last long. Maggie immediately wrapped herself in a towel. By that time, I had already moved closer to the door, and she almost ran into me when she left the bathroom. When she saw me, she screamed and retreated. "Oh, Tom, you scared me," she said in surprise. "What are you doing at home? Everything is fine." Without saying a word, I looked her straight in the eye and extended my arms, smiling. Maggie froze. I noticed a mixture of fear and understanding in her eyes, after which she smiled back. "You are magnificent," I said with admiration. "Everything I dreamed of." Without wasting any time, Maggie threw off her towel and stepped towards me. We kissed passionately, and I picked her up and carried her to the bed. After another kiss, I said, "Maggie, we both haven't been with someone for a long time. My feelings for you have become very strong. If you don't want it, I'll stop, but I think you're attracted to me too. Let's not hold back any longer. I'm yours, Tom. Do whatever you want with me. I just want you to be close, and then there will be no regrets." Our first time was impetuous, filled with passion. Her energy and desire knew no bounds, and I was so absorbed that I remained aroused, although this almost never happened to me. The second time was slow and romantic. We explored each other's bodies and played with different positions. The following week, I was on site again from Monday to Thursday. We didn't have the opportunity to repeat what happened, but every time we bumped into each other in the hallway, we exchanged glances and smiles, letting each other know that it wasn't over. We both knew what would happen when Terry returned, but we didn't want to talk about it yet. When I returned home, Maggie and the children told me everything that had happened while I was gone. Everyone was thrilled that Terry was still in the game. I was stunned that she lasted this long, and to my surprise, she had yet to earn her victory through the bed. I even felt proud of her. Most of the women at the campfire meeting decided that Terry was their main rival, so they tried to vote for her. But Ivy helped prevent this, and when the voices split in half, he had to be held again. The second time, Terry was saved by just one vote. The following week, the remaining contestants were sent to a Polynesian luau, which had nothing to do with Atlantic, but was perfect for a provocative television show. Travis danced with my wife, like all the other men. Each participant danced with several partners. One of the men seemed to be going a bit too far with my wife, or at least the camera obscured his hand as it slid below her back. Later, in their favorite hammock, Travis confessed to Terry that that other man, Rob, had made him jealous. My wife laughed, but Travis looked hurt. He admitted that he had fallen in love with her and asked if she felt the same. Terry explained that although she has grown closer to him, she still loves her husband and her family. Travis decided to escalate his position by talking unflatteringly about me, wondering if I really loved her. Then why did I let her be on the show? Terry did the right thing and explained that she herself insisted on participating and hid it from me until the last moment, when it was too late to change anything. I felt again proud of my wife and the way she carried herself, especially her firmness in turning down Travis at every opportunity. The night ended with her politely declining his offer to kiss her. To some extent, I even felt sorry for the guy. The final test for Terry, Ivy, and a woman named Bobby turned out to be something of a silly Easter egg hunt, in which each contestant had to take one of three different routes on the mountain. The presenter, addressing only the audience, said that men would make every effort to seduce women. By this point, it was clear that both the participants and the audience understood that any infidelity on the part of the women would deprive them of their chance at the main prize. We were all excited and relieved at the same time. I understood that my children were old enough to understand the possible consequences if their mother snapped. Terry played her role well, but the kids agreed with me that Ivy did a better job. Maggie was also of the same opinion. We all expected Terry to come home with a consolation prize. But there was still one more episode to go through. The next week I was again on a business trip to Toledo. But this time I definitely wasn't going to miss the final. I sat in my room, eating pizza and drinking cold beer, just like the first night. Nervous tension almost overwhelmed me. For a 2-hour reality show finale, it was as disappointing as many other shows I've seen over the years. 3 participants went with men into the mountains to look for an object that had personal meaning to them. In the first hour, my wife received a little more airtime than the others. We must give Travis credit, he acted very assertively. Terry accepted everything, and it seemed that she was playing along with the viewer, hinting that he might actually have a chance. Most of their conversation was about me, Terry's husband. To her credit, despite all the revelations she shared with Travis, and in fact, with the world, she never said I was unemployed. However, she hinted that there are problems in our relationship. Travis used this chance to deepen the topic, and when the pair reached the place where their assignment was hidden, he tried several times to start conversations about the future, about how they could be together. As if a miracle had happened, Travis and Terry found a tiny golden box sandwiched between the branches of a dwarf oak tree. Terry made a big deal out of it, and Travis did a lot of work to support her, helping her up to the box. He demonstrated his heroism in every possible way, holding her by the waist and covering her in case of danger. I wasn't too surprised when I saw that there was an engagement ring in the box. Travis got down on one knee on this picturesque peak and confessed his love to my wife. He put a promise ring on her finger on her right hand, saying that he would wait for her and promised to replace my ring with his on the day when she was ready. Travis tried to kiss her, and Terry didn't stop him. The kiss was short because she herself interrupted it. This was perhaps the most interesting event of the show. Travis leaned in for a real kiss, almost lost his balance, nearly falling when Terry took a step back. The look of shock on his face was priceless. Bobby spent the night in the mountains, breaking her vows to her groom. Apparently, she decided that she needed to take a risk and do anything, given the popularity of Terry and Ivy. Ivy also spent the night with John, who was nicknamed Skeeter on the show. They shared a sleeping bag, but kept their clothes on. No one could say what happened in that sleeping bag, or whether the director simply shouted, "Cut," right after the stage went dark. This whole production, like most television shows, was far from reality. I had to endure another hour of idle chatter just to find out whether Terry would take first or second place. I was sure Bobby was already out. My beer almost slipped out of my hands when they announced that Terry had won $350,000. The children called me immediately. They were so excited that I could hardly understand what they were saying. Maggie also called using Angela's phone and was over the moon. "I can't believe it, Tom," she screamed. She won. She really won. When I did not respond to her delight, Maggie instinctively fell silent. "Are you okay, Tom?" she asked quietly. "It must have been hard for you to watch." "No more difficult than I was prepared for," I answered coldly. I didn't want to continue talking on the phone. "Tom, I know." She hesitated, searching for words. "I know what it looked like, but she didn't do anything. That must mean something too. Please don't focus on the fact that she was just playing a stupid game for profit. She didn't disrespect you." I felt even more betrayed by my neighbor and good friend than by my own wife. "I have to go, Maggie," I said, trying to let the disappointment sound in every word. "Tom, wait," she exclaimed desperately. "That's not what I meant." Think about your family, about your children and all your friends in the city. Everyone saw how my wife rejected her partner's offer to win a prize. I interrupted her. And they also saw how little I meant to her. I need to go. Tell the kids not to stay up too late. Volume, she started again, but I had already turned off the call. I spent that night soul searching on that old, uncomfortable hotel bed, and most of my thoughts were about what happened on the show. Despite what Terry said about me, things that I knew were true in her heart, no one close to us would think much of it. She was fair in the game. She said things that both sets of parents and even our children knew. Yes, we lived a difficult life, although the situation has improved recently. Most people we knew in town would probably consider Terry a heroine who went on the show and made a sacrifice for her family. But this did not bode well for me. The next day, after calming the kids down and talking to excited parents on both sides, I finally lay in my bed, glad to be home again. I heard Terry's voice for the first time in 8 weeks around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She was excited and proud of herself. I did my best to sound just as happy. Her plane was scheduled to land the next evening at 7:30 p.m. At night, my thoughts were in a completely different place. The next day, my wife will return home, victorious and with a sense of self-worth. She'll remind me that she kept her word, mostly, but that wasn't the worst thing. I spent all our savings on retirement. Yes, I had a new job, but if everything I predicted after Terry left didn't come true, my marriage would probably be ruined. It was my fault. And if everything goes the way I've planned since the day Terry left, our marriage will definitely end. So, in any case, our marriage is most likely doomed, and it will be very difficult for Terry and me to remain even friends. I won't know the answers until Tuesday. I resigned myself to the idea that I would spend this weekend with my family, like it was the last time. When Terry returned home, she ran into my arms. The airport was only 20 minutes from her parents' house, and another 25 minutes from ours. They called early on Friday morning and practically begged to be allowed to meet her. I was surprised that she didn't run to the children as usual. "I love you, darling," she whispered in my ear with a dreamy smile, and then turned to the children. A few minutes later, my parents arrived, and 10 minutes later, Peter and his family arrived. Maggie entered the house without knocking immediately after them. The party has begun. I tried to enjoy the moment. I watched everyone laugh and interact. When it all became too sad, I took a moment while everyone was listening to Terry tell me some secret information about the show and quietly walked out onto the back porch. A few minutes later, I felt someone stand next to me, looking in the same direction over the fence. "The weight of the world, huh?" she asked quietly. As far as I could tell, Maggie was wise beyond her years. "Something like that," I replied in kind. "Do you want to talk about it?" She looked at me longingly, almost wanting a hug that we knew couldn't happen. Yet, "No," I muttered. "I can't." "Well," she said, turning towards the house, "you know where to find me." Finally, the party failed, and everyone left around 11. Maggie had quietly disappeared shortly before. Terry hugged the children tightly and reiterated how glad she was to be home with them again. I was cleaning the kitchen, and she leaned over, looking at me. "Darling, leave this for tomorrow," she didn't just ask. Emotions are funny when your heart and mind turn the corner of absolute love and trust. I tried to smile at Terry as best as I could, meeting her eyes, but I knew I couldn't do it. Those words from that Friday, the 4th of July, haunted me back then. Her gaze noticeably changed as she turned and headed up the stairs. I locked myself in, turned everything off, and climbed heavily into our room. My wife was waiting for me right outside our door and closed it behind me. I felt the walls closing in, and this feeling hung in the air in silence. "Tom," she began in as loving a tone as she could manage. "I know, all these people, our family today, our friends and viewers across the country, perhaps everyone sees me as some kind of celebrity or hero. Perhaps, from their point of view, this is correct. But I know," she continued, gently touching my cheek, "that I am indebted to you, and moreover, I have something to improve." to make up for the way I deceived you when I left for the things on the island that hurt you. I know I need to make it all right and help heal your heart, show you how much. No, to prove how much I love you. She chose that moment to stop and study my eyes and everything behind them. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, nodding to her. This seemed to calm her down. So, she continued, I'd like to get some sleep. Just cuddle and sleep with you, if you'll let me. I want to be reunited with the man I love this way. Then tomorrow night, I want us to make love. If you don't want it, I'll probably understand, but it's been so long, too long, and we both need it. There wasn't much to say, and she seemed delighted by my acquiescence. I stripped down to my underpants and put on a t-shirt, my usual bedtime clothes. Terry became a little bolder and slept in only her panties. I lay there, running through ideas, concepts, and checklists in my head, like I had most nights since the debacle began. To say I was conflicted that evening would be an understatement. If she acted honestly, then I would be the only one cheating. I felt some guilt about this, but I still didn't know it, and I wasn't sure that we would be together, even if she didn't do anything. The wife acts unilaterally and then blindsides her partner, her husband, with a possible disastrous decision. Check. The wife keeps her promises regarding her husband's concerns about her stupid decision. Check. Despite the astronomical odds, the wife wins the competition without compromising her integrity or embarrassing her family. Possible verification. Check it out. Probable check. I decided that I better enjoy the next night's sex and make the most of it. That's exactly what I did. Terry spent the beginning of Saturday the same way she spent Friday. Well-wishers and acquaintances appeared from behind the tree, suddenly acting like the greatest friends Terry and I had ever had. Then they want to know everything about it. Stephen and Angela couldn't ask enough questions either. They wanted to get the whole behind-the-scenes experience from their mother. When I had the chance, I tried to listen to Terry's voiceover describing those moments, but she was kind of vague. You had to look for him. Terry outdid herself on Saturday night. If we'd had a better night of wild sex with her over the last decade, I certainly couldn't have imagined it. However, I compared it to my late night with Maggie. 3 times for me at my age, and with a woman I knew was unheard of. My wife didn't hold anything back either. She wasn't wild and didn't prefer rough sex to lovemaking, but she was in the moment and very attached to it. I slept well due to complete exhaustion. Karma, or God, or both were on my side, and I say this with all sorrow and trembling. On Sunday morning, I walked into our kitchen to find Terry very happy and cooking a delicious breakfast. Stephen spent the night with friends, and as always on Sundays, Angela slept. I had barely poured myself a cup of joe when I heard a blood-curdling scream from above. Terry and I looked at each other worriedly as I walked upstairs. Halfway there, I was met by my completely exhausted daughter. "Oh my God, Dad!" she exclaimed with all her might. "Did you see this?" She was frantically waving the phone in the air as if I could see what she was showing me. How could she? Angela began to calm down, but also began to cry. I'll be the laughing stock of school for months. By this time, Terry was standing at the bottom of the stairs with an expression of confusion and at times fear. "Calm down, Ang," I told my daughter. "Come downstairs and tell me what the hell you're talking about." She looked at me as if an alien had taken possession of her father. "I'm not going to be in the same room with this woman of easy virtue," she screamed and quickly headed back to her room. "You need to go watch Wish Island after dark and do it in privacy, Dad." I looked down the stairs at my wife, who wouldn't meet my eyes, and then I let out a guttural groan and ran in the other direction. Sitting in my office, it didn't take me long to find it. I've seen some after-dark versions of these shows in the past. At least I still had parental controls on my daughter's phone. 17-year-old Stephen had no such control and could watch his mother in all her glory on some porn site. Poor child, I thought. Overall, if I tried to remain completely impartial, the video wasn't as bad as it could have been. The camera, likely mounted in the corner of the room near or below the ceiling, captured the after-hours activity in grainy green light. At the foot of the bed, Terry was kneeling, the camera capturing her profile, but mostly her back. Travis and Skeeter stood in front of her. Skeeter was in the foreground and Terry's hands and mouth were very much occupied by the young man, meaning the viewer was left to use their imagination. It wasn't until she stopped and walked behind Travis, who was in the background of the camera, that we could all see what Skeeter was collecting. That was all I could bear. I probably sat there for another 20 minutes before going back down to the kitchen. Angela just sat there, staring at the wall. "Are you okay, baby?" I knew it was a stupid question. Her look confirmed it. "Where is Mom?" That was my next question. "I don't have a mom anymore," Angela said coldly. "If you mean your marital and maternal arrangement," then she ran away before I could tell her what I thought. I had nothing to answer. But before I could say anything, she continued. "Why did she do that, Dad?" My daughter was in despair and started crying again. How could she? She knew that this would happen. What the hell was she thinking? Words, daughter, I tried to be stern, but under the circumstances it sounded empty. Angela began to laugh, quietly at first, and then louder and louder. Her laugh was always contagious, and I couldn't help it either. Soon we both had tears running down our cheeks and our stomachs hurt from laughing. This was most likely a defensive reaction. Stephen burst into the kitchen at that moment and stopped abruptly. "What the hell is so funny?" he shouted in bewilderment. It was clear that he had also seen the video of his mother. The three of us hugged each other, and then I finished cooking breakfast, and we sat down to eat, talking. It has been a long time since we all had such a good conversation together, despite the fact that the topic was so unpleasant. "What are you going to do, Dad?" asked Stephen. I was expecting this question about 10 minutes ago. "That's the million-dollar question, Stephen," I answered honestly. "And right now, I don't have an answer." "You're not staying with her, Dad, I mean." He trailed off. "No, son," I said sadly. "It's already been decided." Angela went to the shower, and Stephen admitted that he could not look his mother in the face. He went to see his friends. I sat down at the computer and was surprised when I opened our banking app and saw that Terry's prize money, minus taxes, had already been deposited into the account. I transferred half of our funds, with the exception of this large influx, into a new account. However, I took $3,000 from Terry's money. I could always return them later, although I doubted she would bring it up. I decided to go for a little drive. Terry was probably doing the same thing. I hoped I wouldn't run into her. I felt satisfaction that my suspicions were confirmed, and at the same time deep sadness. Perhaps for couples who lived together for 2 or 3 years without children, everything would be different. With Terry, it felt like the loss of an entire life. We've already been through worse times, damn it. The worst part was that, upon reflection, there was no reason to involve the children in this. No strategy, no game. Nothing but comfort that spoke of how she saw her husband, at least as I understood it. When I got home, Terry was sitting at the kitchen table drinking wine. The house was dark and quiet. She glanced at me, not meeting my gaze. "For what?" I said more than asked, in a dull voice. What was the point? "As a reward," she replied, looking at the wine in her glass. "Great," I replied sarcastically. "What happened last night? A reward for your stupid husband." Terry didn't answer or move. "I don't know what will happen next," I said. "But I can't be near you now. I'm leaving in a few minutes. Maybe I'll be back tomorrow night or later in the week." As I headed upstairs, I heard a faint sorry come out of her mouth. I was sweating while packing my things. The day was hot again, but the intense heat moved to the East Coast. And then it dawned on me. This bitch turned off the air conditioning. "I'll let you know when I get back," I growled, dragging my suitcase and backpack toward the door. Then, much louder, "And if when I get back the air conditioning is still off, I'm going to rip it out of the wall and put it on your head like a hat. You've already earned money on all your air conditioners. Give the kids a break, if they even want to come home." I'm not one to throw complaining parties. I went through a hard time with the person I was thinking of growing old with, but I rarely allowed myself the luxury of craft beer. In one of the shops near my hotel, I found a new beer that looked interesting and took it with me. It felt good to finally end the uncertainty and waiting. I made lists, getting my thoughts in order for the coming storm. On Monday, I showed up at the office for a new job and was immediately called into the boss's office. I wondered if I had made a mistake in one of my reports given all the recent events. It turned out that this was not the case. The boss, the site manager, and the owner of the company were waiting for me in the office. "Please sit down, Mr. Daniels," the owner said formally. "I assume you've seen this morning's paper." I didn't see it, but I could guess it. "No, I haven't," I began. "Yes, she is my wife, but probably not for long." "I understand," he said dryly. "However, our company has a reputation that we must maintain. I built this business on integrity, and while you may think it's personal, I disagree." He was waiting for my answer, but I already knew what would happen next. "I will take advantage of your 90-day probationary period," he continued. "Sorry, Mr. Daniels." And just like that, I was left without work again. At least I had a new bank account to send my last paycheck to. I had nowhere to go, so I drove through our neighborhood and stopped at Maggie's house. Maggie opened the door before I could even knock. She had the saddest expression I've ever seen on her face. "Come in, Tom," she suggested. "Would you like something to drink?" I agreed to a glass of her tea. She wondered why I wasn't at work, so I told her my news first thing. If a face can become even sadder, then it happened to her right then. We talked about how this would affect children. By the time this whole story is over, they will no longer be children, at least on the inside. Maggie repeated, "I'm sorry," over and over again until I asked her to stop. We had known each other for so many years that it was clear that she felt guilty for supporting Terry in the first place. It was shock mixed with anguish, as if she had lost a safe bet. Then she asked what I was going to do. "I can't be home right now," I said, stating the obvious. "One careless word and everything will burst into flames like a match hitting a can of gasoline. I will never hurt her physically, but—" "Can you leave?" she suddenly asked. I looked at her in surprise. "Leave very far?" "I have to be there for the kids," I replied. "They will still need me. It's summer holidays, but I don't want them to avoid home or do something stupid because they have such a bad mother. Although, to be fair, it's not that she's a bad mother, it's just that she made a terrible mistake that is affecting them. In time, they will get over it." "I'm asking if we can leave together," she asked the question again. "What?" I was amazed. "You mean you and me? Go where?" "Somewhere," she whispered. "Where you can think. I'll be in good company, and I'm not going to put pressure on you if you don't want it." Her face turned red. "Honestly, I'm a little confused because I love this stupid woman almost as much as I love your children. But I want you to know that if you give me a chance, when you get divorced, I will claim you as my own. I won't be the reason for your breakup." "This will have nothing to do with you," I answered firmly. "If we have to wait to be close again, I understand. I'll even respect you for it. What happened? It was my fault. I saw you there and really wanted you." "Tom, don't," she said compassionately. "We are both adults. I was much more ashamed until this video came out." "Okay, where to?" I started to get used to this idea for several reasons. "I don't know," she seemed unsure. "I've always wanted to go to Miami." At this moment, she looked almost cute, flirting, but at the same time expressing sincere concern. "Well, I was thinking about New York, but it's probably as hot as Florida," I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Yes, I need a few days to come to my senses and maybe forget a little." "Do you want to invite the kids?" she suggested with a reassuring tone. "No," I replied. "They may need my help on the phone, but they might just benefit from spending time with Terry without me. Maybe this will give them the opportunity to clear things up." By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we already had plane tickets and booked a hotel on the beach. It wasn't too crowded in August. Maggie offered to pay for the trip several times, but I refused. I was going to use some of Terry's money for her misdeed. Half an hour later, I returned home to pack my things for a longer trip. We booked a room for 3 days and 2 nights. It was a suite with 2 adjoining bedrooms. I was a man at a turning point in my life, but despite the possible consequences of sharing a room with an attractive woman, I could not help but respect her friendship and concern. Terry came into the bedroom and watched me for a moment before speaking. "You told me you have work, didn't you?" Her tone sounded as if she was about to go on the offensive. I answered without looking back. "Then why was your car parked outside Maggie's house most of the day?" Yes, I thought, she's really going to come at me. "My job is gone." I turned to her with fury in my eyes. "Thanks to your dirty video. Now I have to start all over again." "They can't fire you for this," she began. "This is against the law, and we could." "This is an at-will state, and I was on probation," I growled. "You're crazy. I'm going on vacation before you ask. I still can't see you. You have 4 days to explain to our children and try to find a common language with them. I'll write to them later to let them know where I am. Don't bother me with calls or messages. We'll solve this nightmare when I get back, okay?" Terry didn't look upset anymore. She reverted to her old Irish character, unwilling or unable to take orders from me. "I know what I did was wrong," she spat, without calling me by name. "I don't need you to tell me what to do." "It seems," I replied regretfully, "you have little understanding of what is wrong. How are your parents doing? Has everyone already seen your 5 minutes of fame or less?" "Damn, you've become a bastard," she hissed. "There is no doubt that they are not happy with me at the moment." "That's putting it mildly," I replied, turning sharply and zipping up my bag. Terry left loudly, making a whole show out of it. Obviously, she did not understand what reconciliation and repentance were. The children later told me that only Terry's father knew about the video. He felt that telling her mother would be too much of a blow. I just hoped I had the courage to prepare for it before one of her bridge friends gave it away first. I threw my suitcase in the car and drove in a long circle around the block, ending just a few meters from the house. Maggie had already opened the garage. Apparently, she didn't want nosy neighbors asking unnecessary questions when we returned. Our plane landed at 9:20 p.m. Maggie seemed very tired, and I knew that her emotions were a strong driver of the day. On the contrary, I was excited. The day had been busy, and tomorrow promised to surpass it. At least tomorrow I'll have all the answers, and I can start figuring out where my life is going. Although I had no plans to have sex with Maggie, even if she had insisted, I was still a man in crisis, but still a man. She had been a long-term friend who had cared for my children for many years, and I needed her advice and support more than her body right now. Maggie came out of the shower wearing a long robe, just as I expected. We knew each other well. I always showered in the morning and changed into a t-shirt and shorts while she occupied the bathroom. We talked a little about what she would like to do on her vacation. In the morning, she said she wanted to work on her tan before the sun rose too high and the heat became unbearable. I didn't have to wait long. Maggie and I had breakfast in the hotel restaurant located in the lobby. She went into the private bathroom to change, and when she came out, I was again amazed by her beauty in the skimpy bikini she was wearing. At all our neighborhood parties, she always wore modest one-piece swimsuits. Maggie looked amazing for a woman of 45. This did not come as a big surprise to me, because I saw her often and could only guess what she looked like under her clothes. Her skin was flawless. She could easily pass for a woman younger than me. "Maggie, you are incredibly beautiful," I couldn't resist complimenting. "Oh, Tom, thank you," she laughed. "You always know what to say, and I know you mean it. Now behave yourself and finish all your business so we can explore the city later." Maggie came up to me and kissed me on the cheek. It was a warm, sincere gesture. At that moment, I realized that during all this time, there had been many such gestures between us. She was not just a neighbor, but a real friend. "I need about an hour," I said after her as she walked out the door. The private investigator's report was extremely detailed. As I expected, it cost just under $9,000. The night before the final show, Tuesday, Terry took a walk along the beach, passing the men's quarters. Of course, at that moment only Ivy remained in hell, and in the men's house there were two recipients of caresses. The likelihood of being noticed was low. Reading the report, I discovered a few surprises. The first one made sense. Ivy was a hired actress. She even participated in the show, The Bachelor, but with a different hair color and style. So she didn't care if Terry left the house. She was a figurehead. Then it became clear why all this was needed. Terry went to Villa Levy. One photo showed him opening the gate for her on the beach, and another showed him putting his arm around her waist as they walked back to the house. Terry looked quite comfortable with a man she barely knew. The private detective agency treated me with care. They were clearly professionals in their field. Attached to the report were two photographs, more blurry than I expected. My wife was on the bed, and also on Levy, she was straddling him. The report explained that it was a windy night, and the drone operator had difficulty holding the device due to strong winds. But he was skilled enough to get evidence through a 2-inch gap in the curtains, despite the constant rocking of the drone. The report also stated, "There is 15 minutes of video surveillance available at your request." I was grateful they didn't send the recording. When I finished reading the report, another surprise awaited me. Terry and Levy studied at the same university at the same time. The report acknowledged that they could not prove or disprove whether they were in a relationship at the time, but they included a transcript of the audio recording they received. Terry's departure from university suddenly made more sense to me. Even if her roommate was part of the problem, the guys she knew probably saw Terry as a potential easy date. It came up during their pillow talk after the second round that night. Jenkins, as the detective noted, this was not his real name, asked my wife what it was like to be rich and satisfied. Terry mockingly replied that $350,000 before taxes was not considered wealth. Jenkins joked and retracted his comments, saying, "Okay, at least just satisfied." The conversation led to interesting details. It became clear that Jenkins had been scouting her regarding his idea for the show, and they had been discussing it for months before she left for the island. It was hard to read how she insulted me as a bad earner, and Jenkins played on her feelings by claiming that I was probably not only bad in financial matters, but also in bed. However, she surprised me with the only compliment addressed to me, which fell from her treacherous lips. When I finished reading it, I knew they would both pay for it. Jenkins will pay literally, but my future ex-wife will pay figuratively. I called the detective at the appointed time. All participants were in the conference room, ready for my call. The team repeated the information. There was nothing new compared to the report. At some point, a woman's voice remarked that if I only needed a divorce, then the video from After Midnight could cost me much less. The only ones laughing were on their side of the line. 10 minutes later, John, the company's founder, released his team. "Tom," he said gloomily, "go to the lobby. There is a phone waiting for you without registration. You can pick it up from the concierge. There is only one number in contact. Find a secluded place and call me in 10 minutes. "I'm concerned about your situation," John said as soon as I called. "Some people get angry in this situation, but you are frighteningly calm. I have a feeling that you have been contemplating revenge for a long time. I don't want to know any details, and by law, you don't have to tell me any. In a nutshell, what are you planning?" I told him the basic gist of my plan. "You're going to break at least 4 laws," he replied, "and that's even without violence." He realized that I was not going to back down. "Okay," he sighed, "I'll give you free advice, against my own wishes. Remember that you cannot prove anything about their student days, but you have influence and the court of public opinion. He will try to threaten you, be prepared. Such people do not give up easily. Stay strong. Let little bits of information leak out until he realizes you have him in one place." I was grateful for the advice and for the person who gave it to me, and I told him so. He advised me not to use the phone without registration to make a call, but to buy a new phone from some gift shop outside the resort. I laughed, but he quickly dispelled my doubts. He asked where I thought drug dealers, scammers, and would-be terrorists infiltrating the country got their burner phones from. I did as he suggested, texting Maggie that I needed another 20 to 30 minutes and for her to enjoy the sun. She sent me a thumbs-up emoji. I was nervous, to say the least. What I was about to do had never occurred to me in my entire life, neither in dreams nor in fantasies. Levy Jenkins speaking, he said smugly, like a question, making it clear that he was a busy and important person, standing above everyone else who called him. Tom Daniels, Mr. Jenkins, I said with feigned uncertainty, making him feel like he was in charge. Mr. Daniels, he answered calmly, but I detected a note of hidden anxiety. Glad to hear from you again. Are you calling to thank me and perhaps apologize? It's okay. This is not necessary. I understand where you were coming from. Many people in ordinary America don't trust Hollywood. Hell, most people just don't get it. It's part of the game. I'm happy for your wife and your family. She played brilliantly, and you must congratulate her. She is an amazing woman, and I am glad that I was able to meet her. He deliberately left the end of the sentence in the air. I knew what he meant. However, he couldn't be so stupid as to think that I didn't see the after midnight video or that I didn't know about it. I was silent, not answering. I heard him chuckle huskily before he spoke again. You understand, Mr. Daniels, that no one can prove that it's your wife in the video, right? That's why they're so grainy. He was so smug and had no idea what awaited him. Great, I answered like a robot. So you make money from ratings and advertising, and then you sell adult versions of the videos for extra money. It was a statement, not a question, and he didn't explain anything. I'm calling about another matter. You should be in a secluded place if you don't want your career to end today. Don't you dare threaten me, he growled. I'll hang you on my mantelpiece in the morning. What was it like in college with her, Jenkins? I asked with a slightly cocky tone. Was she the same then as she was that night in your villa? Listen here, idiot, he tried to maintain control, but I heard him quickly walking somewhere. If you try to use any footage from my island or anywhere, I will tear you apart. In fact, I'm calling my lawyers right now. They will issue a ban order so quickly it will make your head spin. Now listen up, you little idiot, I said through clenched teeth. I'm in a place where you can't reach me. I'm not going to sue you. Terry is a thing of the past for me. I'm in a place where no one can find me. Remember this. I'm not calling about a legal issue. I'm calling to negotiate. Now it was his turn to remain silent. My judgment is public opinion, and it will begin to happen today until you, your studio and production company are in ruins. I planned this even before the first episode aired. My people got ahead of you and thoroughly investigated everything. We have photos, videos, and audio recordings of you and my ex-wife talking things over. I'm sure that after this comes out, no one will want to work with you. You can prevent this. All you need is to transfer $3 million to my account before the end. Fuck you, smart guy, he howled with a hint of panic. You're not intimidating me. I will send my people. Of course you will, I interrupted him. But like I said, I'm in a place where they won't find me. Remember, I had time. Now it's $3.5 million. Damn you. $4 million. Do you want to continue, dumbass? You have no leverage. I fell silent, waiting for him to come to his senses and see common sense. What do you have? He asked, now desperately. For me to know, Jenkins, or should I call you Adelman? I paused and took a deep breath. A private detective found out his real name. You're willing to listen because you don't have much time. How can I be sure that you will keep your word? He asked more quietly. You can't. You only have my word. I wanted to make everything very clear. I need money. $3 million. That's for all 3 times you were with her that night. I have a video. You should have made sure the curtains were closed tightly. You received a bill from me in the mail, yesterday or today. This is for architectural services rendered. It contains the account number. If the money is transferred before the end of the working day, you will not hear from me again. If not, I will take this as your decision to refuse or as an attempt to contact the police. In any case, your life will begin to fall apart at midnight, and every day I will post new details online until you are destroyed. I can't raise that amount, N. My laughter interrupted him. What a dumbass, I snorted. You read too many scripts. Until the end of the working day. I ended the call and went to change into my swimming trunks. This call was probably the biggest gamble of my life, although perhaps marriage to Terry was her equal. Life is a strange thing, that's what people say. I guess you don't think about it until weird things knock on your door. Maggie has been a great friend this entire week, and I would expect nothing less from her. The money was transferred at 4:57 p.m. Strange things happened literally 30 seconds after I entered the house. Terry was sitting in the kitchen, and the children were nowhere to be found. I talked to them every day, and they told me that their mother first made excuses, then moved on to explain that it was an adult problem, and at the end constantly apologized for what she had done. They got bored of it. Terry had no idea what I found out unless that idiot called her. But I didn't think he did, at least not so soon. But still something strange happened. Where were you and with whom? She asked in a low, almost threatening tone. I just shrugged. Oh, I see, she grinned evilly. With our neighbor, trying to restore your masculinity. And for what? Because I pleased a couple of guys? I would say, grow up, but do you know what I came to while you were away? She didn't answer her question, and since I didn't care, there was an awkward silence in the room. Terry reached for the stack of papers on the table. This is what arrived while you were away. She waved the envelope in the air. It was a statement from our Fidelity account. What the hell did you do with our money? Her eyes almost fell out. Her face was distorted with indignation. It's funny to hear you say that. I tried to be sarcastic, but I almost laughed. I think I suddenly have a gambling problem. Terry sat back down and sighed. This was the strangest and most out-of-character behavior I have ever seen from her. Listen, Tom, she began slowly, I'm filing for divorce. I couldn't help but laugh. What nerve this woman has. You take part in some TV show, hide it until the last minute, and then turn it into a real show about sex. And you are divorcing me? Yes, she answered immediately. I thought about this for a long time while you were away. Tom, I need a fresh start. I have fulfilled my role. I gave you two wonderful, beautiful children. I've spent all these years trying no, hoping that you would someday solve our financial problems. I gave you every chance. But now I need my time. You are not a bad person, and I know that you loved me. You love me. I'll have to live with what I did, at least until it's forgotten. I will have to live with this shame, but I don't have to live with you anymore. She handed me a thick envelope. Whatever you do with our money, just keep it. If you try to take my prize money, I'll set my lawyer on you. And Tom, give back that $3,000 you took for your little trip. Angela will stay with me until she finishes school. I've already talked to her. Stephen is old enough to decide for himself what to do. Let's try to do everything amicably for the sake of the children. I spent the next few days in melancholy. It's easy to blame others, especially those you care about. Even though I didn't agree with everything Terry said, and I was about to leave myself, I still did a lot of thinking and analysis. She was right about some things, about small, everyday things. We were never a perfect couple, we never even came close. What she wanted in life, I could never give her, and I finally realized that this was normal. If it weren't for her show, I would never have figured out Levy Jenkins. He was more her style, and Maggie suited me. I realized that I needed to leave and hide for a while. I didn't want to leave the kids, but I knew Terry wouldn't stop me from seeing them. Her problem was not with me as a father, but with my financial insolvency and what we lost along the way. I realized that I needed to leave and hide for a while. I didn't want to leave the children, but I knew that Terry would not interfere with our meetings. Her problem was not my relationship with the children, but the fact that I could not give her what she wanted from life, especially in material terms. And now, more than ever, it became clear to me that Terry and I had lost something important along the way. I asked Maggie if she wanted to come with me, and she seemed delighted that her life was finally taking a new turn too. She accepted my offer, but was adamant about paying for her share of the trip. Since she was a good friend of mine, I couldn't help but wonder what made her tick. "You, all of you, are very dear to me," she began one evening. "Yes, I'm closer to you, that's true, and I have feelings that go beyond friendship, but I hope through my actions to remain close to Stephen and Angela, and maybe even Terry." That was enough explanation for me, and I felt the same way. I hoped that over time, Maggie and I's relationship would move to another level, and perhaps we would become a couple. We planned our first trip to Banff, Alberta, Canada. We checked the weather forecast before choosing this location, keen to escape the summer heat. I sat with my wife, having just finished dancing at Angela's wedding, watching the guests. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. Well, at least they should have, considering how much money I spent on this event. Sitting right in front of me at the table were Terry and her new husband. They looked happy. Maggie interrupted my thoughts by handing me 2 ibuprofen tablets. My knee was still hurting, and I was limping slightly, which was the result of my encounter with Levy Jenkins, who finally caught up with me. His gang attacked me in a bar in Austin, Texas, which was surprising in itself. Fortunately, 2 bouncers were just nearby on break and smoking, otherwise I probably wouldn't be alive. I suspected it was Jenkins' order. The bouncers quickly dispersed the attackers, but they fled without anyone having time to write down the license plate numbers of the cars. By this time, Jenkins was already overseas, his company having been sold to Universal the year before. I thought about looking for it, but then I decided there was no point. As I told my ex-wife, every action has consequences. The thought that I might not live to see my daughter's wedding made me shudder. Stephen hadn't found his soulmate yet, but to be honest, he hadn't really been looking. My son came up to me and asked my beautiful wife to dance. As soon as they hit the dance floor, Terry turned her chair around and sat closer to me. "The ceremony was beautiful, wasn't it?" she said with a beaming smile. "Thank you for making such a gorgeous holiday. I'm sure Angela will always remember this day." I would have done it anyway, so I said nothing. She tried to read my emotions, but apparently she couldn't find anything. "How's your knee?" she asked, apparently not knowing what else to talk about while my wife was busy with our son. "It hurts," I began, "but I think it will get better with time." I paused. Everything was somehow awkward. "How's work? How do you like life in California?" After the divorce, she moved to California, which at first made me very angry because Angela had to change schools. Stephen chose to stay with me until he went to university. "Okay, everything is fine, just a little different," she answered hesitantly. "But there's no snow there." This made us both chuckle slightly. A lot of time passed, and the weight of the past remained between us. "I'm sorry for what I did to you, Tom," she suddenly blurted out. "I will always regret the shame I brought upon you as a husband and on our children." I nodded carefully, trying to find something meaningful to say. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly. It seemed to me that she didn't expect this. "For what?" she asked in surprise. "You probably mean you're sorry for what I did." "No," I looked into her eyes. "That's not what I wanted to say. Terry, we obviously had problems long before you let that slimy guy Jenkins talk you into signing on for that stupid show. I just didn't see it. That's why I'm sorry. I don't regret that I couldn't give you what you wanted materially because I tried. I did everything I could, but it would never be enough." Terry was taken aback by the mention of Jenkins. "I never told anyone what I did to him, and I never said a word about the attack, which left me with injuries to my leg, knee, and ribs 3 years later. You knew that he... But how?" She began to stutter, realizing all the consequences. "That means you." "Oh, God." I didn't say anything, just smiled slowly. "Well, I think I still met your expectations, albeit late." She was still trying to piece everything together. "Now I understand the true meaning of patience. I wish the same for you." Terry looked much more enlightened than she had just a few minutes ago. She seemed to try to say something several times before she spoke again. "I want to be honest with you. You finally deserve it. At that time, I was tired of always saving. From arguing over the air conditioner, I was desperate to find a way out. When Jenkins approached me with the offer, I didn't really think about anything other than money and how it would help us finally solve all our problems. I suspected that he would want something in return, but I decided that it would be okay since you wouldn't know the details, and I didn't love him. It was just a deal. Maybe it was sexual services, but for me, then the end justifies the means. Most of all, I wanted to help you so that we could finally get rid of daily difficulties and enjoy life. Now I understand that I chose the wrong path, but then I was sure that you would react the way you did. I decided I had to take the risk. I hurt you deeply, and what I regret most is that I broke your trust. What about those guys, Travis and Skeeter? I asked, raising an eyebrow. About what happened after midnight? I didn't lie. It was a reward, but Jenkins told me I had to give it. These two guys supported me every step of the way leading up to my victory, and Jenkins said they weren't paid enough for their efforts. Terry hesitated again, as if she was going through something in her head. She was still predictable after all these years. I guess, she said with a shrug, you were right about other things too. All these shows are fake. Her gaze then slid to her new husband, who was dancing with Terry's mother, then to Maggie and Stephen. She looked at me again. Thank you, Tom, she said sincerely. I think I understand now. He treats me very well, and I've learned my lesson. It won't happen again. I hope our families can grow closer in the future, but I understand if you don't want to. I'll still try to improve the relationship. With these words, she returned to her table. My life wasn't perfect, but whose life is? Am I closer to what I wanted? Closer to complete joy? The character Don Draper on Mad Men once said, "What is happiness if not the moment before you want to be happy again?" As I watched my wife and son dance, I realized that I was probably as close to happiness as I could get. We had enough money to never worry about it again. My architecture firm was thriving. Maggie ran a charity and volunteered for several other organizations. Our intimate life was full, free of inhibitions, and exhausting, as we often talked about to each other. My children lived happily, and since my wife is the person they grew up with, everything became natural and harmonious for us. Happiness was now in abundance, and it all began one extremely hot summer when love and money took on their true meanings and separated. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.